Okay, so I'm just going to give a few minutes for attendees to start rolling in. And let's see, we'll go ahead and give, so it's 8:58 on my clock here. We'll go ahead and start at 9 o'clock. Alrighty, it's 9 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. Attendees will probably be trickling in. Hopefully we have a few. Okay. So welcome to the Manoa Career Center's first virtual law schools fair. I am Kay Jernigan, and I have a few Manoa Career Center staff that are helping me today. But I do want to let you know that we have Brent Fujinaka, who will be helping with monitoring the Q&A portion of this main session. The Manoa Career Center is here for students and recent graduates. We welcome you to virtually meet with a career counselor after this fair for further assistance with your law school plans, resume and interview help, and planning your next steps. I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded to share with students who are not able to join us today. This is a virtual law schools fair, and the purpose of this event is to provide UH Manoa students the opportunity to gather information from representatives regarding admissions, program highlights, and financial aid. We will start the virtual fair with a panel session. Panelists from different law schools will share information on 3 areas: why law school, tips for applying to law school, and tips on financing your law degree. Panelists will address each topic, and if time allows, we'll open it up for Q&A after each topic is presented. The second part of the fair will be from 10 till about 11, which will be our virtual booths. This will consist of individual schools and programs holding their own Zoom meetings to meet with potential students and share about their specific programs and more time for Q&A. For this main session or panel, if you have any questions, we ask that you submit your questions in the Q&A section only. The Q&A section can be found at the bottom of your screen. We ask that you do not use the chat function as questions or items may be missed. And please wait your turn to have your questions answered. Keep in mind that all questions and answers can be seen by all attendees. So we'll go ahead and get started with the panel. The first topic is why law school? And we have Elizabeth Hutchinson, Whitney Danielson, Patricia Morris, and Colin Watrin. And I'll have them go ahead and respond to the question as well as a brief introduction before they speak.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Steele Hutchison. I'm the Director of Admissions at the William S. Richardson School of Law at UH Manoa. and I'm so excited to see so many of you here on an early morning. I want to talk to you briefly about sort of why law school. And I think many of you will find you've come to law school, you're bringing with you a wealth of different experiences. Some of you are undergraduate students here, some of you are returning, changing careers, pursuing a graduate degree already. There are lots of great reasons to think about applying to law school. And I want to point you, before turning you over to a host of fantastic colleagues, I want to give you a couple suggestions about how you might think about why you want to go. Number one, check out the UH Manoa Pre-Law Advising Center, right? It's look, they're doing all of their counseling online right now. It's free, and they are not Richardson specific. They'll help you with your applications to any of the fantastic law schools who are here on this panel. If you are a resident of Hawaii and have a Hawaii Public Library card, there are free online test prep for both the LSAT and the GRE through the Hawaii Public Library. So check that out. New classes start every month. And I think the thing that I would kind of invite you to do is to make sure to stop by and visit with all of us today in our Zoom rooms. I ask the questions that you have about, why you want to go to law school, whether you think your interests match up with the specialties and passions of the folks that you are that go to law school with. So with that, I just want to say, have a great day, and it's nice to see you.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. So my name is Whitney. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the admissions counselor at the University of Oregon School of Law in Eugene, Oregon. And yeah, I just have a few thoughts about why you should go to law school. So law school can really offer a foundation for a lot of different careers. Lawyers obviously work in the criminal justice system to reform and administer it, and they help govern our cities and our states, and they advocate for social justice. Lawyers, empower their clients and uplift their communities. They can work in advocating for their clients in court, for fighting for public policy changes. They can help victims of abuse, people who've had their rights violated, and they've, can help Indigenous tribes regain rights and land sovereignty. We have alumni of Oregon Law working on all those things right now. But I just also want to point out that lawyers also perform really equally important tasks like helping draft wills. They might help settle property disputes. They can guide nonprofits, work as judicial clerks to help the legal system run smoothly. They can help guide nonprofits and create articles of incorporation for small businesses. And with a law degree, you can also do things like become a professor, you can become a law librarian, you can work as a legal scholar. So lawyers are really involved in every part of society. And if you become a law school graduate, you really become uniquely positioned with the power and the skills and the knowledge and resources to help shape our society and to hopefully bend the arc of society towards equity and justice. And I'll just say that now more than ever, we really need lawyers. So we need them to help guide us through this time of immense change in our country and really in our world. And those of you who are planning to start law school in the next few years, you're going to be really starting law school at a historic time. When your generation of lawyers graduates, you're going to be entering the profession resilient and creative and capable of working anywhere. So I just encourage all of you to consider how you could help drive change in your community and consider attending law school. Thank you.
Thanks, Whitney. I'm up next. My name is Colin Watron. I'm the Associate Director for Admission and Student Life with the Seattle University School of Law in Seattle, Washington. And happy to be here with you all today to share a little bit more. And thanks, Whitney, for sharing some of your perspectives. And Elizabeth, I'm sorry, my call froze for a quick second, so I didn't hear everything Whitney said, so I'll try not to repeat. But I think, set up a really good foundation in terms of thinking about why law school or why you might be considering this profession. And Whitney kind of highlighted some of the ways that you can make a really personal impact in people's lives. And at the end of the day, I think the law is a profession about people and a profession about problem solving. And there are certainly a lot of people in need of support and a lot of problems that need solving in our world right now, especially. And the decision to go to law school is a very personal one. It could be because you have some sort of family connection, maybe a family member who was a legal professional, or maybe a family member who's had some struggles with navigating the legal system themselves, or maybe they could have had positive experiences in the legal system or negative experiences in the legal system that are motivating them to want to pursue what I often think of as kind of the keys to the door to open into that system that you can help navigate or to help others navigate. I also think some people might pursue a law degree as an opportunity for professional growth or to make an impact on a profession that they care a lot about. I often meet with people who have been teachers or healthcare workers or folks who work in the music industry or other areas where they see the value of what a law degree could allow them to do to impact and make change in these professions that they really care about, but at a higher level, once they've had some experience in those fields already. So there's lots of different reasons why you might want to pursue a law degree in that sense. And when thinking about this topic, because it's a very a broad one, and I know my colleagues have wonderful things to say, I was like, what can I say that's unique on this topic? And I think I wanted to mention today a little bit about why go to law school right now, particularly when it's a pretty unique time. And I know for our students, at least, and I know many across the country, you're not sitting in a traditional law school classroom. You might be taking classes by Zoom, or you might be having kind of a hybrid scenario. And I know there's some people who might have concerns about going to law school at this time because of that situation and that format. And I wanted to pass along some thoughts and words that are actually shared with me and some of our new students by one of our Washington State Supreme Court justices, Mary Yu. And she brought up the topic of COVID lawyers or COVID law students and the people who are going to school during this time and who maybe had concern that when they go to look for a job, an employer who saw that they went to law school during COVID might not look at that as favorably. And she said, you know what, I want you to flip that on its head and think about the fact that we're not going back to the normal sense of things. Court hearings are going to continue to be done via Zoom and teleconference, and students need to learn those skills now, and what better way to learn it by doing it. And so the types of skills that you can learn by going to law school now are going to be the skills that are required of all lawyers going forward. You're going to have a jump start on the many people who maybe are a little resistant to that change. And so thinking about the types of skills you learn in terms of your adaptability, your work ethic, your ability to communicate and connect with people in a virtual space, all of these things that you would learn during law school now are going to be what the future of the legal profession and the professional world in general look like going forward. So I wanted to make a quick note about why law school now could be an interesting question to think about as well, on top of all those other very personal reasons that might be motivating you to attend as well. So I'd be happy to chat with any of you a little more throughout the panel or throughout the session, and hope you can swing by the Zoom room a little bit later on. Thanks.
Thanks, Colin. Hello, Hawaii. I am Trish Morris. I am the Director of Admissions at the University of New Hampshire School of Law. That is about an hour north of Boston, Massachusetts. So you pretty much can't get further away in the United States than we are right now. But thank you all for having me. Thank you all for coming. Following up on what Colin said, looking at the practice of law has totally changed with COVID, which is fantastic because it opens up new opportunities for when you become an attorney as far as how you work, where you work. Are you able to be in New Hampshire and represent a client in Arizona? With these new hearings that are the new virtual world that's going on, we've learned to adapt and to make your world in the practice of law expand exponentially. And that is just amazing to do. But I think even more so, it's such an exciting time to go into law school to practice law, because we're seeing a dynamic shift in our social awareness. We're seeing new areas of law emerge, like we're talking about the pandemic, technology, for example, blockchains, all these new types of things and technologies and social issues that are coming up, diversity and inclusion, are creating huge avenues for you all who are passionate about those things to make your passion your practice. And I think that as we go through the next 3 years of law school or 5 years, you'll learn what those passions are. You may already have them from a first career. I did. I liked animals and I ended up going to animal law. It's just a wonderful time, exciting time to go into law. We've seen it with politics right now and constitutional law. So if you're thinking about it, and you're ready for it, we all welcome you to join us in one of our schools and join us in our Zoom rooms. So with that, I'm going to wrap up Why Law School and pass it back over to Kay. Thank you.
Yay. Thanks, guys. If you can still stay on, because we do have maybe a couple minutes for any Q&A. Again, please post your Q&A in the Q&A section at the bottom, and panelists are able to respond. So far, I don't see anything coming in. I see someone posted in chat, scholarship opportunities. I'm assuming we'll get to that in our last topic, which is financing your law degree. So hold tight. We should get to that in a few minutes. Oh, a Q&A. I see another one. Hey, sorry, I slightly missed the public library resources. Would you be able to repeat that? Otherwise, thank you, panelists.
Yes, the Hawaii State Library has a partnership with GALE Services, GALE, and any of you with a Hawaii State Library card may register for a free online course for test prep for either the LSAT or the GRE, and that is in addition to the amazing resources that you can find on the LSAT website at the Khan Academy, which is also free. So goodness knows, I hope you can save an ocean with a law degree. Thanks, Sophia.
Okay, yes, so we have some questions coming in live. I'm going to move on to the next panel. However, if some of the panelists can please respond by typing the answers in, and all attendees are, you should be able to see all the answers as well. Okay, so we'll have you, the next group of panelists, we will be focusing on tips for applying to law school. We have Shani Butts, Natasha Richmond, Brian Wall, Robert Schwartz, and Alan Guerrero.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Brian Wall from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, William S. Boyd School of Law. That is on the 9th island of Las Vegas, and very excited to be speaking with you today. For E. Moore, who put your question about the LSAT, this is actually the section where we're going to be answering that. Our group of 5 is going to talk about the components of your law school application. And we're going to start by talking about the 2 statistical components of the application, the GPA and the LSAT, and I'm going to be taking the GPA. So you are obviously, hopefully, having a wonderful experience at the University of Hawaii Manoa right now, studying whatever it is that you choose to study. One of the common questions that we get is, what should I major in if I want to go to law school? And the answer to that is whatever you want. We will have students from every academic background possible, and we do not have preferences for that. What we want to see in your application is that you have a real interest in what you're studying, and that interest hopefully will be manifest with very good grades, but also with you pursuing internships and research projects and other things in your area of study. Now, as far as the GPA goes, obviously the higher your GPA is, the better that's going to mean for your chances of being accepted to law school. But we realize that there are a lot of situations that might come up. You might have started out as a neuroscience major for your first year because you thought you wanted to go to medical school, and then you took organic chemistry and realized, oh my goodness, this is not my skill set. We understand that that's going to happen. We understand that you're going to have situations that might come up that will impact your ability to get good grades. You're going to hear a little bit more about optional addenda that you can include in your application, but it's good to let us know if you've had any of those situations. A couple of other things you should know about the GPA. We're going to be looking at trend lines in your GPA. So if you have a rough semester or two, please don't get too discouraged. You still have time to turn that around and put together an impressive showing. We also are going to be looking at all of your post-high school credits. So if you started at community college and then transferred to University of Hawaii, if you had a visiting semester someplace else, all of that is going to be included. The other thing I'll say too is that we're not just going to be looking at your grades, we're also going to be looking at what you've done during your college experience. For many of you, that might include extracurricular activities, clubs, organizations, service, volunteerism. For many of you, that might include working because, you know, you need to eat and pay rent, or you may have siblings or parents or grandparents or other people who you need to take care of. And we are not as much concerned about the perceived prestige of what you might be doing as we are with why you're doing what you're doing and what skills you've learned along the way from doing that. So please don't feel that an internship in Washington, D.C. for a senator is necessarily better for purposes of going to law school than working at Walgreens to help your family pay rent. Whatever it is that you need to do and whatever it is that you choose to do during these years while you're an undergraduate and potentially beyond that before you apply to law school, make sure we see it. Make sure that's part of your application so that we can kind of see what makes you tick. And with that, I'll pass it off to Natasha to talk about the LSAT.
Hi, I'm Natasha Richmond from Lewis and Clark Law School in Portland, Oregon. Aloha. I'm going to be talking about the LSAT and letters of recommendation, things that you could be doing during your undergraduate, but not necessarily. You can also do them afterwards if you plan to take some time off between undergraduate and law school. So Elizabeth already mentioned the Khan Academy, which is what I usually recommend to prospective students because not only is it free, but it's completely online and it's on your schedule, and they have 4,000 to 5,000 actual LSAT questions in the LSAT bank. So it's a great way to study. I've heard great reviews from students. Studying for the LSAT usually takes between 8 to 12 weeks, and that's just an average rough estimate. For some people, they take longer. For some people, they take shorter. The two bookend examples of real students I like to use is one gentleman who quit his job, moved into his parents' basement, studied for 8 hours a day for a month straight, and he was able to bring his baseline score from a 150 to a 172. Not everyone is able to do that, to move into their parents' basement and just study for the LSAT for a month. So on the other hand, I had a woman applicant who just had a baby and she did pretty well on the LSAT. And I asked her how she studied. And she said, I studied an hour each day. And I said, you studied an hour a day? And she said, yeah. Is that not enough? The point is that it doesn't matter on time. An hour was all she had because she just had a new baby. So when I talk to people who've done well on the LSAT time and time again, they've just told me they took practice tests after practice tests after practice tests. And that seems to be the key to doing well on the LSAT. It's not a particular book or a particular class. It's just doing it over and over again. The second thing I wanted to address was for letters of recommendations. And this really varies by school. So this is definitely something you should inquire about for the schools that you're applying to. Most of us require at least 2 letters of recommendation. For Lewis and Clark, we require 2, but we'll take up to 3. For the letters of recommendation, we really want you to ask people who can speak well of you. And in some cases, that may be your TA over your professor, who will go back to Brian's OChem example. You know, if your OChem professor is teaching a 500 lecture class, he or she may not know you that well, but the TA probably does if you go to weekly TA sessions or things like that. Another kind of letter of recommendation that I usually tell people about is, we really don't care about titles. Senators and judges and law partners are very impressive titles and careers, obviously, but if that person doesn't know you very well in a professional setting, we just can't put as much weight on those letters. We'd much rather hear from people who've worked with you in a professional setting and can speak well of your work performance, your academic performance, character integrity, and things like that. So it's not too late to kind of start thinking about putting a seed in your mind about who you might want to ask for letters of recommendation. And with that, I will turn over to my colleague, Alan, who will speak about personal statements and other things.
Good morning, everybody, and aloha. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm going to be talking to you about other factors in your application, which include your personal statement, your resume, and supplemental statements or optional statements. So first things first, if you're applying to multiple law schools, many of those law schools will require these items, but be very, very careful and read the application instructions. Number one thing to do, read the application instructions, because as many law schools, will ask for these items, but the instructions will tell you whether it's required, whether it's optional, They'll also provide you with different prompts related to these items. So you really need to be aware of what those prompts are and what those specific school instructions are. So with regards to your personal statement, things to think about in writing your personal statement, again, review the application instructions, see what the prompts are. Make sure that you take your time in writing this statement. Don't draft it tonight and then submit it tomorrow. Really take the time and be thoughtful about what you want to write, and make sure, again, you are addressing the prompts that are listed for you by that particular school. Make sure there's a clear theme in your statement. Make sure it's well written. Check for typos, do spell check. And very important also, if you're addressing a school or a school's program, make sure that you list the correct school name in your personal statement, because as much as I am happy that you tell me that your number one choice of law school is UC Berkeley, I'm not sure someone from USF would be happy to to see that. So again, be very careful, be thoughtful, review your personal statement, for all of those different, grammatical and spelling errors. And one last thing I would tell you to do is, have other individuals read your statement, somebody who knows you really well, so that after they review the statement, they can turn to you and say, that's a really good representation of who you are as an individual. And then perhaps someone who's not so familiar with you, like a professor or a pre-law advisor, so that when they finish reading your statement, they can say, that was a really great, statement about you that I never really knew that this about you or about your passion. So again, take your time and have several individuals, review it, and hopefully provide you with constructive criticism. With regards to your resume, again, read the application instructions. I can't stress that, how important that is. Many resumes are required from law schools. Some are optional. Keep it short, keep it concise, use bullet points. Try not to let your resume be, information that you've already expanded on in your personal statement. You want your resume to complement your personal statement and not just be a rehash of everything you've already written. Again, keep it short and concise. Many resumes that I've seen are usually 1 to 2 pages. We are interested in your skills and your accomplishments. And again, you want to highlight those items in your resume and have it complement your personal statement. Many law schools also will ask you to submit supplementary or optional statements. Many of these statements are in reference to diversity. Again, read the prompts. If you have an interest in sharing more information about you, your experiences, perhaps how those experiences have shaped and informed who you are today, and perhaps how those experiences might shape who you will be as a law student or attorney, by all means, think about submitting, those optional diversity statements. Oftentimes, these statements are your opportunity to help us learn more about who you are as an individual and not just a test score or a GPA. So you really have a lot of control regarding your personal narrative, your personal story. Take every opportunity, even if it's an optional statement, to provide that information to us so that we can better learn who you are as an applicant. So having said all of that, I'm going to turn over to my colleague at UCLA, Dean Robert Short.
Thanks, Alan, and aloha, everyone, and good morning. My name is Rob Schwartz. I'm the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at UCLA Law School, and I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about factors to consider when you're deciding where to apply to law school. First, I hope you can just take a deep breath and get excited about the journey that you're about to embark on. There are a lot of wonderful law schools in this country, and I hope you can enjoy the process of getting to know them better. But before you get to know them better, I encourage you to get to know yourself a little bit better, right? And spend some time thinking about the factors that are most important to you in deciding where you want to apply and ultimately attend law school. A few years ago, the Law School Admissions Council actually asked prospective applicants like yourself to rate the importance of various factors in terms of how important they were in the decision about where to apply and ultimately attend law school. If any of you are interested in that, feel free to follow up with me after today, and I'm happy to share that list with you. But some of the most important factors on the list were things like location of the school and clinical programs that are offered, employment prospects, the cost and scholarship availability, and reputation of the faculty and rankings. But as you think about where you want to apply, I encourage you to think about those factors and any others that are important to you, and think about what's most important. As you do it, one resource that you might want to take a look at are called the 509 reports put out by the American Bar Association. It's a great tool that will help you compare some important factors amongst law schools. So for example, if you want to know about the class sizes at particular schools, that'll be in the 509 reports. Or if you want to know the percentage of students that received scholarships, that will be there. You can also find the median LSAT and undergraduate grade point averages for all the law schools. So it's a great resource. While law schools will, of course, consider many factors that have been discussed today, besides your LSAT and your GPA, those are going to be important. So I encourage you to apply to a range of law schools. Pick some that are safety schools that have median scores that are below yours and that you're also excited about, and also pick some that I would call real reach schools where perhaps the medians are above yours, but you're excited about the possibility of attending them. The other thing is some schools will provide a detailed chart showing the percentage of various LSAT and GPA ranges. And you'll be able to find that on the Law School Admissions Council website, lsac.org, under the official guide to U.S. law schools. And finally, don't forget to consider fit. By that, I mean, try to ascertain how happy you will be at a particular school. And don't hesitate to reach out to all of us, people that are on this call today, so that we can help introduce you to our communities. We want to help you figure out if our schools are a good fit. That's one of the favorite parts of my job. And to expand on that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Shani from Catholic, who's going to talk about what to do after you're admitted, which you no doubt will have lots of options after all this great advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and aloha mai kako. My name is Shawnee Butts. I am the Assistant Dean for Admissions at Catholic University Law School in Washington, D.C. I am a Hawai'i transplant, as a matter of fact. But as Rob said, it's important to figure out whether or not a school is the right fit. So once you've been admitted, we encourage you to visit the law school if you can. Now, I know that during this COVID-19 pandemic, that many schools are not allowing in-person visitors. However, several schools have virtual tours on their website. They also have opportunities for you to connect with members of the admissions team, either by phone or by Zoom. So that's also another opportunity to connect. And it's important when you're planning on connecting with those schools that you have a list of questions that are ready to go, that you are asking each of the schools that you've been admitted to. One of the things is that 9 out of 10 times you'll be able to find answers to those questions on the website. But in the event that you can't find them, that's an important time to connect with somebody at the law school to make sure that they can answer your question. As Rob already said as well, it's important to connect with faculty, students, current students, and alums. They will be particularly excited to speak with admitted students to kind of answer those questions about what the community is like, what types of opportunities are available to students, the externship opportunities, things of that nature. So I think it's important that you can take the time to get connected. And each of the schools really want to make sure that you believe that you're in the right place, because if we've admitted you, we know that we want you to come to our school, but we also want you to come and be happy and excel. So those are important times to, again, take an opportunity to connect with the school. And if you happen to find yourself on a wait list and not admitted to your number one school, I encourage you to pay close attention to the guidelines that they give to admitted students. Several schools will provide you kind of a frequently asked questions list or a list of instructions on what you should do to kind of boost or bolster your application. Sometimes it's including supplemental materials. Other times it might be doing interviews. Whatever those guidelines are, I encourage you to take a good hard look at those first before you call and ask. And then once you've kind of exhausted all of those options, then you can kind of connect with the admissions office to find out if there's anything else that you can do. But remember, there's a difference between being excited and persistent and then calling every single day with the same question. I know you're going to be excited and you really want to get into your #1 school, but just make sure that you are following the guidelines. And with that, I will turn things over back to Kay.
All righty. Thank you very much. So there are some Q&A, open Q&A that are coming in. So just reminding panelists to tackle those questions. The nice thing about Zoom webinar, so reminder to all attendees is please post your questions in the Q&A. If you click on Q&A at the bottom, we have those questions that are open, answered, and dismissed. So you could click on answered and see all the questions that were asked in the past and the answers that go with it. So due to time, I'm going to move along with the panel. We will have some time, I'm hoping, at the end for general Q&As as well. So the next topic is financing your law degree. And we have Brian Zerby, Isabel Moreno, David Kirshner, Brian Hinkle, and Tracy Simmons.
Well, good morning, aloha. I'm gonna start us off. My name is Brian Hinkle. I'm the Assistant Dean for Law Enrollment Management at Santa Clara University School of Law. We could spend a lot of time on this topic, and I know we're already over time a little bit. I'm going to lead us off with a discussion about financial aid in terms of cost of attendance. One of the things that you'll be able to determine by visiting a law school site is what the total cost of attendance is. And by that, you want to include both what you know as fixed costs. Those are going to be tuition and fees, and those are going to be published by the schools that you may be interested in attending. And then there are estimated costs, and these are going to vary from institution to institution. They may not represent your total cost, but they're what the school has estimated it's going to cost you to be able to live and go to school. And estimated costs are going to include things like room and board, books, supplies, transportation fees, health insurance, and miscellaneous personal expenses. There also are allowances for things like computer purchase, childcare or dependent care, costs related to a disability and study abroad costs. The costs that aren't allowed are things like prior debts, including credit card bills and car payments. So we really suggest that you try to minimize your debts as much as possible before going to law school, and don't take on a car payment. But to get financial aid, you have to actually apply for that. And so I'd like to turn to my colleague, Dean Simmons at McGeorge School of Law. If you'd like to introduce yourself, maybe you could talk a little bit about the application process for financial aid.
Hi, everybody. Tracy Simmons. I'm Assistant Dean for Admissions and Financial Aid at McGeorge School of Law, University of the Pacific in Sacramento, California. Thank you, Dean Hinkle. So quickly, a couple things. One, you definitely want to submit a FAFSA. Some of you may be familiar with the FAFSA.
Hi.
Did she?
I think she froze up.
Okay, I'll take it real quick.
Okay, thank you.
So to apply for financial aid, you'd want to file a FAFSA form, the free application for federal student aid. That's available online already. It was released on October 1st, and you can use last year's tax return to be able to fill that out. But there may be some institutional forms that you may need to fill out for institutional aid as well. And so it's important to find out from each institution what the forms might be that you might need. So speaking of institutional aid, I think I'd like to turn things over to my colleague at UC Hastings, Brian Zerby, who's going to talk a little bit about the institutional aid process.
And thanks, Brian, and good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Zerby. I'm the Director of Admissions at UC Hastings Law in San Francisco. And generally, when you're thinking about institutional aid, there are really three, I think, general types. One would be merit aid, we refer to as merit scholarships. The second type would be need-based aid, which we often refer to as grants. And then there are some, I would call kind of specialty donor restricted, usually scholarship funds that have some other kind of criteria that may be more narrowly defined depending on the donor's wishes. But let me just dig into each of those types real quickly here. Merit scholarships are fairly widespread. There's fairly widespread availability at law schools. I wouldn't say it's universal. There are some law schools which only distribute need-based awards, but by and large, most law schools do have merit scholarships available. And for many of us at this point in the admissions process, the analysis, review, and awarding of merit scholarships is pretty well built into the process of when you're admitted to law school. So for some offers you get from law schools, they may tell you if you're eligible for a merit scholarship, they may tell you that right in the acceptance email and tell you the amount. For some other law schools, maybe they'll tell you a little bit after you're admitted, but you'll find out sooner rather than later. And if you're not eligible for a merit scholarship, they may tell you you're eligible for a need-based grant. And then usually for grants, you would have to use the FAFSA and probably an institutional form to determine eligibility for the grants. With scholarship offers, I would encourage you to definitely read the fine print that comes with those offers. There are usually some conditions like maintaining full-time enrollment, maintaining satisfactory academic progress. Those are, I would call them kind of baseline conditions. But some law schools have additional conditions, like you have to finish with a certain GPA at the end of your first year of law school, or you have to finish with a certain class rank. And those conditions are based on, that makes the scholarship eligible for renewal during your second and third years. So be very careful about paying attention to those conditions and read all the fine print very carefully. Most scholarships are applied to tuition and fees, but some law schools may have some additional awards that can be used for those living expenses that Dean Hinkle was mentioning earlier. And finally, I'd just say a word on the donor restricted scholarships. Those tend to be awarded a little bit later in the admission cycle because the admission staff needs to do a little bit more homework on determining who's eligible for what. So be patient, and if you don't get a scholarship offer right away, there may be something that happens a little bit later in the process. So keep your options open. And the last thing I'll say is just to kind of reinforce this idea about fit. You know, the largest scholarship opportunity might, be the most attractive looking option for you at the time of the award, but make sure that, when you're making your final decision about where to go to law school, make sure you go to where you think you're going to be happiest, even if it's not your biggest scholarship offer, but where you're going to be happiest and where you think you're going to be setting yourself up for success in your career. So with that, I'll end there and turn it back over to Dean Hinkle.
Dean Simmons, we lost you there for a second. I do have a question that it's related to this topic.
Okay.
What about negotiating scholarships? How do folks go about doing that?
So I think the first question always is you have to determine whether a school will actually negotiate scholarships, because there are many, many law schools that do not. And then there's some that have an actual process for this. And so you want to know exactly what the law schools expect of you if you do this. The second thing would be basically do your homework and do the math. Oftentimes I hear from my colleagues who do negotiate scholarships that they get really kind of mixed messages and misinformation from their candidates who want to negotiate. And so kind of know what you're talking about. You basically want to sit down and have done your homework. Sometimes you might have to do that with a financial aid counselor, but basically you want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Things like Dean Hinkle mentioned, cost of attendance and things of that nature. So pay attention to those things. Lastly, I would say, make sure you have all your documentation And so there are some schools that are going to actually require that you submit the actual letters from other schools showing the actual scholarship. The one way that you can kind of put yourself in a hole is to basically kind of overstate or misstate, which is just a nice way of saying lying about the scholarship offers from other schools. Do not do that. That is just, you're going to a profession where your word matters, your reputation matters, and things of that nature. Each school has their own scholarship set up for a variety of reasons based on budget, goals, et cetera, et cetera. And so you just want to be thoughtful about that, but you want to have a strategy and a plan. But again, going back to my first point, you want to ask first, because for many, many law schools, negotiation is not on the table.
Great. We talked a little bit about filing the FAFSA. The FAFSA is important to be considered for federal student assistance, and that includes federal student loans. So Isabel, can you talk a little bit about the student loan process?
Sure, yeah. So hello, everyone. My name is Isabel Moreno. I'm the Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at the University of Utah S.J. Cooney College of Law in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so, yes, as Dean Hinkle has described, part of the process or part of the reason you're applying for FAFSA is so that you can be considered for federal student aid. And so I will say, in terms of loans, there are really kind of three types. You have those that are most popular under the Department of Education, and then you have private loans, which are not necessarily quite as popular, and they have kind of other strings attached that don't make them quite as popular as the federal student loans. And then you might have, depending on your institution, institutional loans. And so I'm going to briefly touch on all three of those. But as I mentioned earlier, the most popular of those three categories are, of course, the federal student loans. And so for under the Department of Education, there are two types, federal direct unsubsidized and the federal direct grad plus loans. And so the federal direct unsubsidized, I think, are what most undergraduates are mostly familiar with, because this is usually what is available, although you may have a subsidized option. Unfortunately, at the grad school or professional school level, that's not necessarily an option. And so the maximum annual for that is $20,500. It does have a total cap of a little over 138,000, and that includes your undergraduate loans. There are, you just have to make sure that you're satisfying certain expectations, like you're enrolled at least half time. You have to make sure, of course, even to apply for FAFSA, that you're eligible to apply. So you have to be a U.S. resident or eligible non-resident. And so that's essentially kind of the federal student or federal direct unsubsidized. And then you have your federal direct grad plus. And so this one's basically takes into the maximum allotment per year is essentially the cost of attendance, which was described by Dean Hinkle at the beginning of this session. And so that one does take into consideration in part your credit. And so that's something that you want to take into consideration. Cost of attendance can be quite a large number. So just kind of a word of caution there. Don't take more out than you absolutely have to. It usually also carries a little bit of a higher interest than the federal direct grad plus loans. Although related to both of those, I will say that right now the interest rate for both of those are pretty low, considering what they have been in years past. So moving on to private loans, as I indicated earlier, I mean, these are not quite as popular. You can apply for these directly through a bank or through essentially kind of those institutions privately. They are usually not covered under the Department of Education type process. And so a good example of that right now is that anyone who's on repayment that has their essentially their student loans under the Department of Education, they actually have, they're on deferment if they choose to be, and are also not paying interest. So private student loans are actually not being covered under that. And so just keep that in mind, that usually the things like those type of programs are not covered for private loans. And the amount that you can access varies from institution to institution and credit union or the bank. And then finally, with institutional loans, this is something you're going to have to touch base with your specific school with. I know, for instance, in our program, we make them available as emergency loans, and they have a very quick turnaround time in terms of payment, and they're really small amounts. And so that's what I can say about student loans. I'll take it back to Ding Ding.
Hi there. Folks may be borrowing these student loans and they may be really worried about the amount of debt that they are incurring. So I thought I'd have my colleague, Dean Kirshner at USC, talk a little bit about loan repayment assistance. And I think we're running a little over time, but I think we can probably cover this in short order.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm David Kirshner, the Associate Dean for Admissions and Financial Aid at USC Gould School of Law in Los Angeles. Right, so I think with all the focus we've put on kind of the upfront process of paying for law school, right? How do you pay to get in the door? It's certainly worthwhile to spend a few minutes talking about the options to help with repayment once you graduate. These loans are all real money and real dollars that are going to have to be paid back once you graduate. So generally speaking, LRAP, loan repayment assistance programs, are designed to help law students who choose to dedicate their careers in the public or nonprofit sectors. Jobs that tend to pay somewhat less for those attorneys. So many law schools have LRAP programs. The qualification criteria can vary from school to school, so it's certainly worth asking each school, but generally the way they work, if you work in a qualified job, and each school defines qualified slightly differently, but oftentimes this certainly includes pro bono and nonprofit agencies, and some schools will even include government jobs, certain government jobs. So if you work in qualified employment for a certain number of years, oftentimes there's a sliding scale, meaning a certain percentage of your loan will be forgiven by the law school once you meet kind of the number of years in qualified employment. At Gould, this ranges anywhere from 70 to 100% of loans through the LRAP program. So the LRAP is a loan given to you by your law school to help repay your debt at graduation that becomes up to fully forgivable when you satisfy certain requirements. And the details can be fairly technical, but financial aid officers at every school are able to explain these well. So beforehand what kind of employment and how many years would be required for you to receive loan repayment assistance. The other thing that I would leave you with is that these programs can often work in conjunction with federal loan forgiveness programs. So, at Gould, we certainly try to help students going into the public sector via loan repayment coupled with programs the federal government has made available. One of those is a repayment plan called Pay As You Earn, PAYE. And this basically sets your monthly repayment amounts at no greater than a certain percentage of your salary. So that's ensuring that you have money to put a roof over your head, and pay for your food while not being crippled by student loans. So there's the Pay As You Earn option. And you can then couple that with the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And I think many of us are hopeful that under the new administration, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program will live up to kind of what it was launched to do. And that was to forgive the loans of individuals who work in qualified public sector work after 10 years of repayment. So if you take an LRAP program and you couple that with a pay-as-you-earn repayment scale, and then you have the 10-year federal government loan forgiveness program, there's no reason why someone committed to a career in the public sector, in the nonprofit, in doing that kind of work should let law school debt get in the way. But certainly you do need to go in with the understanding that it is real money and real dollars that you'll have to pay once you graduate. So in a very brief nutshell, that's what kind of the LRAP and loan repayment assistance programs look like.
Great, thanks everyone. I would just encourage those of you who may be veterans to also identify who the Veteran Benefits Coordinator is at the schools that you may be interested in attending, and they can give you more information about how the benefits are coordinated there and if the school participates in the Yellow Ribbon program. With that, I'll turn things back over to Kay.
All righty, thanks. Great information. Okay, so we do have a few more minutes. So I will have maybe everyone can, all the panelists, you can turn your videos on, and we can go ahead and open the time up for any Q&A. I see one coming in. It says, is it possible to work at a firm or in a private practice and still work toward these loan forgiveness programs? Example, via a certain number of pro bono hours. Maybe I'll ask the last group of panelists to respond to that.
I'm happy, Dean Hinkle, since so that relates to the loan repayment assistance programs and the loan forgiveness. So unfortunately, no. Those programs require that the full-time work be in the public sector. That said, pro bono is a wonderful thing, and many private law firms do provide compensation to their attorneys who do engage in pro bono work. But no, for the forgiveness programs, that more often than not will not qualify.
All right, any other questions? And again, these are just general questions, not particularly for the last topic only. Any questions, any open questions for all panelists? All right, if no other questions, yep, there you go. Are there courses and clinical programs available regarding immigration law?
I can take that one. Okay, so you're going to want to check in with a specific school. Generally, I'm going to say the answer is yes. A number of schools are going to have both coursework in immigration, and what's becoming increasingly important right now are clinics in immigration. Our immigration clinic at UNLV, for example, during the last presidential administration has had more work than we've had students who have been able to help. So if you're interested in that, I imagine you're going to find a lot of opportunities. And make sure you come by all of our booths today to chat with us about the individual offerings that each of us have in immigration law or any other areas that you're interested in.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, so last call for questions. Okay, so for the second part of the fair, will be our virtual booths, which will consist of the individual schools and programs holding their own Zoom meetings. And this is your time to meet, with these representatives, ask your questions. And the Zoom booth information, it will be sent to you by email. So for those that have registered, we do have your email on file. Brent will also be assisting me in posting the link in the chat. So if you go to the chat function, you should see the link to an Excel or Google Doc that has all the Zoom links, meeting IDs, and passwords. University Manoa Career Center does also have a help desk. So if you do need any assistance, please visit us as well. And really, I just want to end by saying enjoy, meet with all the schools and representatives. And just a reminder to please come to the Manoa Career Center or actually meet with one of the career counselors. We are meeting with students virtually over Zoom. And we can help you with your law school application materials, as well as prepping for interview. So take care. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to all the panelists. Great job, guys.
Thank you, Kay.
You're welcome. You guys did great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you. Sorry for my internet
Aw,
issue.
Don't worry.
Okay.
hope to
See
see
you
you
later.
soon
Yeah,
Thank you.
we miss you guys.
in person.
Miss you all.
Have a nice plate lunch for us, okay?